problem is that today, if I will believe in this idea of India, then I will be tagged as Hindutva, fascist, Brahmanical person. So how to cope with that? Thank you.
So the reason I come here to give this talk is precisely so that you know that this idea is very well rooted, well documented. I showed you, and that's why I made sure Bhaskar ji chanted them all out to you. I didn't make it up. हर जगह आप presentation आप freely available है आपके पास. आप इसमें क्या इसके जो resources हैं, किस ऋग्वेद के या किस पुराण के कहाँ से किस चैप्टर से मैंने लिया है, साफ लिखा है. आप जाके इसको वेरीफाई कर लीजिए. आपको मैंने सुना भी दिया है, तो आपने सुन भी लिया है. हाँ, तो सरस्वती नदी कहाँ बहती थी, साफ है. वो ये जो जनजाति थी वो कहाँ रहते थे, वो भी साफ है. वो भी साफ है कि ये जो सभ्यता कैसी फैली, वो भी साफ है. ये भी साफ है कि इसका कॉन्ट्रैक्ट क्या था, और ये प्राचीन काल से मध्य काल तक ये फैला. उसके बाद ये आज आधुनिक काल तक ये जो सभ्यता, इसका जो फ्लो है वो तो साफ है. तो इसीलिए मैं आई एम कमिंग टू केसेस लाइक दिस in order that you are very clear that when we are generally making this statement, it's not some general statement we are making. What we are really fighting against is a very shallow colonial idea that was spread by those who ruled us to essentially tell us that who are you? You people are not even a people, you don't have a culture, I am ruling you. So of course we will rule you. So of course a colonial people will always do this. By the way, this exact narrative was done by the Europeans in every other part of the world. The French have a similar story about the people they conquered, the Dutch about the other people they conquered. When the British went to Australia, they called it terra nullius. Terra nullius is Latin for empty land. The fact that there were people living there did not matter. What they are saying, that you don't matter. So, this idea was somehow managed to be put into our intellectual life. And of course, they would do that. The question is, why 75 years after independence are we still perpetuating it? And my theory on this, and it's a theory, you can take it or believe it, is that one of the major problems of our post-independence history is that those who became the intellectuals of India after independence were not the descendants of those who fought for India's independence, but those of the collaborators. I will not take names here, but you can do your Google search. But you will find that almost all the key intellectuals of post-independence India, the writers, historians, journalists, and so on, all of them were either collaborators themselves. I'll take here one name, at least Yashpal, who provided the information on the basis of which Chandrasekhar Azad was killed. He became one of our greatest writers of Hindi. Just imagine. And there are many others. You find out a little bit about the Thapar family. Find out a certain journalist whose grandfather was in the Imperial Police Force and ordered the firing on the rebels of the naval revolt of 1946 in Mumbai. Find out who they are. So this was the major problem. Why this happened? Next question, please.
Hello, sir. My name is Divyanshu Tripathi, and I am a research scholar in Pandit Deendayal Upadhyay Chair. So my question to you is: was there an absence of Sanatan Dharma before the socio-religious contract that you have talked about? And if so, what about the worship of Pashupati Mahadev that the idol was found in Indus Valley civilization?
So, one important thing that you must understand, और इसमें एक्चुअली भास्कर जी को फिर बुलाता हूं, आपको चांट करके समझाता हूं क्या. The Vedas do not claim that they are the origin of our civilization. They are the assimilators of our civilization. Right? Those who are putting together the compilation. ये संहिता है. This is very different from, say, the Quran, which is a beginning point. So the rishis are not saying कि ये सभ्यता हम ही से शुरुआत किया गया है. वो कह रहे हैं कि हम लोगों ने इसको इसका इसका संकलन क्या है. We have compiled this all in one place, and they actually claim this, say this in the very first suktam of the Rig Veda. It's called the Agni Suktam, in which they interestingly state that it says first, oblations to the Agni and so on, and then we give regards to the modern rishis and to ancient rishis. मतलब ऋग्वेद के टाइम में, this 5,000 years ago, they are already talking about the ancient rishis. So what they are accepting is all the ancient gods and those traditions already exist. All we are doing is putting it onto a common platform. That's why it's a samhita, compilation, and we are creating a common minimum program of rituals, which is the Yajurveda. तो आप समझिए क्या हो रहा है ये. This is the creation of a common operating principle. Now you can keep adding apps to it, as I said. The Pashupati worship may have existed well before the existence of the Rig Veda. Now, having said that, I'll make one clarification. The fact that the Harappan seals have it does not mean it predates the Vedas, for a very simple reason, that the Harappan cities rose when around about 3000 to 2000 BC, when the river was already drying, whereas the Rig Veda is clearly during a period when the river is flowing completely. So it is very clear that the Rig Veda predates the Harappan cities. It relates perhaps to the early Harappan period or even pre-Harappan period, because the river is in full flow, and we know from geological studies that by the time the great cities of Harappa were built, the city was already in decline, so which is not mentioned in any of the Rig Vedas. So the Rig Veda predates the Harappan cities. But that's a different point. I'm just making out the point here to you, is that the Rig Veda is not the origin of our civilization. It's that which connects all the dots of our civilization. That is what is going on here. But since I asked Bhaskar ji kahan gaye? Yahan hai. So I want him to chant the very first suktam of the Rig Veda, where the ancient and new rishis are both being given respect. And remember this, 5,000 years ago, Bronze Age, they are already talking about the ancient rishis.
Om Agnimine Purohitam Yajnasya Deva Mrityujam Hotaram Ratnadhataram Agnih Purve Bhirvishibhiridhyo Nutane Vruta Sadevam Ehavakshati.
So it's very clear, right in the beginning. So the Rig Veda, you see, when Western scholars are studying it, they think it's a random distribution of. It's not the case. It's very clear what the first, and you heard that this is the first suktam, where they're clearly saying we are paying respect to the ancient and present rishis. So they're already talking about continuity. And in the last, they're giving all the gods space around the fire. All the ancient gods have a space around the fire. So you can see what is going on. They are talking about continuity, and they are giving respect to all the gods of all the tribes. And by the way, new people can also join it. So as I said, at some later point, my forefathers would have joined it. They may have contributed Kali and Durga and Jagadhatri, another god. Maybe some of you come from other parts of the country, you may have contributed. And then we created a common platform in which we could essentially, it's like, as I said, you can keep doing this. As we grew, we may have gone to Southeast Asia, we would have taken on gods there also. And so on and so forth. Yeah, the next question. He wants to ask a question, then I'll come back.
My name is Vinay. I'm a student of political science. The question is that, sir, so there has been a population in the discourse of narratives, so that is, reclaiming the Indian civilization identity, sir. As Bhagavad and me have been saying about the geographical and civilizational identity that we are all one. My question is, sir, in the present context, that there has been a toxification of convergence and radicalization across the expanse of the population. How do you think that this rejuvenation project would help to counter that, because you are working with the government too? So what do you think that what are the policies that would help?
Well, I'm here in personal capacity, and this is not my area of work. I work in a different field altogether. But it is important that this conceptualization of Indian identity and giving its clear history with all the details is an important project. Because first of all, otherwise you will keep hearing nonsense that you are subjected to, that India is not a nation but a union of states, even though the person who said this belongs to the Indian National Congress. And this is stunning, but you see these are dangerous ideas, because essentially what they are doing is they are normalizing into our heads this idea that India was never a nation. And of course, this is a useful project for certain ideologies. But I want to show you that this idea that we have is a very old one. It is there from the beginning. Certainly by the Puranic period, you can clearly see that's 2,500 years ago at least. We already covered the whole geography of India. The Sapta Sindhu concept has already transferred itself and includes the Kaveri and the Godavari. You heard that yourself. It's a common chant. I didn't make it up. Many of you probably already knew it. The Puranas, all of them, not one, all of the Puranas describe that the description. Roughly, I gave you one. There are others with slight variations, but all the Puranas describe the way. So it is a very deep-rooted identity which is there. It is not something in the 19th century we suddenly described because the Westphalian model of nationhood suddenly popped up. No, this is a very deep-rooted thing. So when we hear these ideas being spread, it is largely because they are basing it first of all on colonial narratives that they are perpetuating. And they need to therefore perpetuate other lies as well to keep the wider ecosystem going of this, including things which have absurd things like the Aryan invasion theory. There is no evidence for it at all in any way. You have all the top geneticists in the country right here. You can ask them. There is no sign of it in our genes. It is not there in the archaeology. In fact, it could not have been for the simplest reason. There was nobody living in Central Asia during the Ice Age. It was just too cold. It's even today very cold. So, this business of our civilization coming from some Central Asia is utter nonsense. All that they were trying to do is to tell us that, yes, we have occupied your country, but you know what? Your civilization was given to you by some white people from the north, and we are here only to give you a software update. So, if this is the thinking that they were trying to give us, the question is, what is the agenda of those who are trying to perpetuate this? And as I said, one part of it, not all of it, one part of it is the collaborator class essentially justifying themselves. Since they are aware that they were collaborators to this country, what they are trying to say is that we could not have been traitors, because you can only be traitor to a country if the country did not exist. How could I have been a traitor to it? And of course, there was a particular strand of political class which came to power after independence, which captured power, and it suited their narrative as well. Because then you could say that this nation is in existence because of us. Otherwise, this nation doesn't exist. Then it is possible to have a father of the nation. And once you have a father of the nation, you can have a chacha of the nation. You can even have a damad of the nation. So, Damade-Hind is only possible if you are able to prove that the entire existence of India is based on them putting it together. If this idea existed from the very beginning, then it is a threat. Yes, there was a lady here who wanted to speak.
Good evening, sir. My name is Kritika Maurya and I am doing history honors from BHU. So I am having two questions. So first of all, sir, as you have said that Al-Baruni can be regarded as a spy to the country. So, but what I have, as per my best knowledge, I have studied that he was so much interested in the Indian culture that he stayed even in Varanasi, learned Sanskrit, translated many books into their language, and that even today helps us to understand many of the things. So how far?
So let me. Spies are always very interested in your country. The problem is, who are they working for? There is no dispute that he was funded by Mahmud of Ghazni.
Yes.
There is also no dispute that you read Al-Barun is India, he very happily gives you all the distances from various points in the world. It is also known that many of the places he mentions were attacked or attempted to be attacked by the guy who paid him. So yes, it is an interesting book to read, but let us be very clear what his intentions were.
So my next question is that you have told us about the Jambu Dweep. So the Polyglot has mentioned it in the declaration. So but as we know, our India is so big and different with different climatic conditions. So it is not for sure possible for the jamun to grow everywhere. And this Jambu Dweep, I think, has come with this.
Then you know it is not the source of the idea. Take a jambu. You have seen a jambu? You know what's it? Look at the shape. It has got a peninsula at the bottom and high at the top. So what you are dealing with is the shape. It is the Himalayas at the top which are there, and then it narrows down into the peninsula. Now can you see the shape of the Indian subcontinent? That is Jambu Dweep. There's a gentleman right at the end, but there's somebody here. Yeah, you can see.
Thank you, sir. First of all, I'm Avinav Mukherjee. I'm currently pursuing my English honors. Finally, greetings to all the dignitaries present over here. So, first of all, a very simple question I would like to ask that previously you have seen how there has been the demonization and politicization of certain Indic texts like the Manusmriti, which has been wrongly translated by the Western civilization, and basing on that we demonize those texts. So, sir, how can we bring upon this clarity in the Indian youth per se? In the village, in the rural areas where there are more, which constitutes more than 70% of the Indian population. So, how do we bring that clarity, considering that there is disillusionment regarding the Indian civilizational identity?
Frankly, I don't think there is any disillusionment. I have travelled to the very deep interiors of India. There is no real problem. The real problem tends to be in the intellectuals who are usually upper middle class. And as I said, many of them have a curious history related to this. You go down in the streets here, just drive any direction you wish for an hour and ask them about their Indian identity, they will have no doubts about it. And this is true across the country. Okay, so this is one important thing. Now, as far as Manusmriti is concerned, it's very important here to understand that there are many Manus in our history. Manu is a lawgiver. It is not a name, it's a title. And it's a title given to those who have established civilization after some cataclysmic breakdown. So the Manusmriti we have is of one of the Manus who is supposed to have re-established civilization after a major breakdown. Now this Manusmriti incidentally is not canonical, it's a Smriti. It's not a Shruti. It's telling you so. By the way, anybody can write a Smriti. Anybody in this room can write a Smriti. That is the whole point about Smriti. We are an evolving civilization. The idea is that new Smritis are written. New Smritis have been written. Who is the lawgiver of our time? Ambedkar. So he is the Manu of our time. The Manusmriti of our time is the Constitution. So this is an important thing we need to do. This is out of context, pulling out something and using it. By the way, Manusmriti was always a loose text. It was never, at any point in time, I don't think anybody is here who lives has even read the Manusmriti. I'll be very surprised anybody in this room has read Manusmriti. But even if you have, it's very unlikely you have ever met anybody who leads their life based on it. So in that sense, it's a completely different text from, say, the canonical value of, say, a Quran. It is not at all like that, or even of the Hadiths. It's totally not. You can entirely perfectly good to be a Hindu, and a very practicing and orthodox Hindu, and have nothing to do with the Manusmriti. It is even possible for some of you to write a new Manusmriti. Because it's a Smriti, that's the whole point about a Smriti. The Shrutis set up the working principle, the organizing principle, that is the underlying operational system. But we have the whole evolution of our civilization is like continuously adding apps to it. The Manusmriti is an app of some point in time. You are entirely welcome to add another app and carry on.
सर मेरा क्वेश्चन है कि जो द हिस्ट्री ऑफ इंडियन सिविलाइजेशन आइडेंटिटी में
सर मेरा नाम आलोक पांडे है, मैं पॉलिटिकल साइंस डिपार्टमेंट से हूँ।
मेरा क्वेश्चन है सर कि द हिस्ट्री ऑफ इंडियन सिविलाइजेशन आइडेंटिटी में मुस्लिम कम्युनिटी को आप कहाँ मानते हैं? क्या इस सिविलाइजेशन आइडेंटिटी में उनका योगदान है कि नहीं है? क्योंकि कंटेम्पररी टाइम में सोशल मीडिया में या फिर हम यूथ में ज्यादातर ये चीज दिखने को मिल रहा है कि मुस्लिम बाहरी हैं, हमारे देश के पार्ट नहीं है। तो क्या इंडियन सिविलाइजेशन आइडेंटिटी में मुस्लिम पार्ट है कि नहीं है, और इस सिविलाइजेशन आइडेंटिटी के विकास में उनका कहाँ है और कैसे योगदान है?
तो मैंने शुरू से ही कहा कि ये कोई स्टैटिक आइडेंटिटी नहीं है, ये इवॉल्विंग आइडेंटिटी है। दिस हैज अ लिंक टू द ओरिजिन, इट हैज इवॉल्व्ड ओवर टाइम, various people have been added along the way in various ways. So as you will see in Trichy declaration, when they talk about Jambu Dweepa, the Muslims are also added to that declaration. So they were added along the way. This is, as I said right in the beginning, many of these Muslims are anyway Indians, even by origin. So they are very much from the beginning, but even if you take into account the foreign elements that were brought in, they are also part now of our civilization. Taj Mahal is a part of our civilization. So is biryani. But that does not mean that we celebrate the Turkic subjugation of this country. I said that right in the beginning. By the way, the British conquest of India has also left behind many things. There are many people who may have converted to Christianity at that time. They are a part of our civilization. Many elements of British period are now element of our, very much a part of not those who may not have liked the British, but I am speaking in English today. So ये एक स्टैटिक पहचान नहीं है। हर युग में इसमें कुछ नए नए चीजों का योगदान हुआ होगा। यवनों का योगदान, हिंदू मंदिर है, वो वैदिक पीरियड में हिंदू मंदिर है ही नहीं, तो किसी समय ये टेंपल बिल्डिंग का ये कल्चर जो है वो आया। हो सकता है ये हम लोगों ने ग्रीक से लिया, क्योंकि वो उनका एक टेंपल बिल्डिंग कल्चर था, हमारा नहीं था, तो शायद उनका ये योगदान है। तो मैं ये मेरा कहना ये है कि आप इसको स्टैटिक तरीके से नहीं देखें। जस्ट बिकॉज देयर इज अ डीप एंड लॉन्ग लास्टिंग आइडेंटिटी डज नॉट मीन दैट इट इज अ स्टैटिक आइडेंटिटी। Many people have been added along the way, and in future will be added along the way. I will take it to the back to the lady after this. आप प्रश्न पूछ लीजिए। I will take 3-4 questions because now it's becoming quite late. So,
सर मेरा 3 क्वेश्चन है।
कोई एक पूछ लीजिए, फिर दूसरों को भी एक चांस दीजिए।
एक काट देता हूँ, 2 कर देता हूँ। सर पहला क्वेश्चन मेरा ये है कि शब्द, भाषा और उससे निकले हुए अर्थ किसी भी संस्कृति के वाहक होते हैं। तो भारत और इंडिया ये 2 शब्द है, आप इसको किस दृष्टि से देखते हैं, पहला। और दूसरा, एक गांधी जी का स्टेटमेंट है, उसमें आपका क्या व्यू है, मैं यह जानना चाहता हूं। वो स्टेटमेंट ये है कि एनी हिंदू शुड नॉट हार्बर एंगर इन देयर हार्ट्स अगेंस्ट मुस्लिम even if the latter wanted to destroy them, even if Muslims want to kill us, all we should face that bravely. If they establish their rule after killing Hindus, we should harvesting in a new world by sacrificing our life.
तो गांधी जी थे। Now, as far as the use of the word India and Bharat is concerned, sure, the term Bharat is an indigenous term, the word India is not. But the word India has now been used for a very long time. And we have imbibed it. What's the problem? I have right from the beginning said we are an evolving civilization. We have picked up many things. We have also picked up the name India. By the way, the Chinese know themselves as Han. They don't know themselves as Chinese. So what's the big problem? So I am trying to tell you is that ये जो शब्द इंडिया है, इसका origin है सप्त सिंधु से। It is clearly linked to, by the way, they are linked words because the homeland of the Bharatas was Sapta Sindhu. और सप्त सिंधु से हप्त हिंदू हो गया, फिर हिंदू हो गया, फिर इंडिया हो गया। तो ये इन दोनों का जो ओरिजिन है वही हरियाणा से है, उसी जनजाति से है, जुड़ा हुआ है। तो इसलिए ये दोनों ही वैलिड हैं। अब जिस भाषा में कह रहे हैं उसमें जिसमें वो प्रचलित है तो वो है। तो आप भारतीय भाषाओं में भारत का इस्तेमाल होगा, अंग्रेजी में आप इंडिया का इस्तेमाल कीजिए, लेकिन मैं इस सोच का नहीं हूं कि इंडिया अंग्रेजी में इस्तेमाल होता है तो इसको अपनाना नहीं चाहिए, ये गलत है, इसको अपना लेना चाहिए। जैसे शब्द हिंदू है, हिंदू शब्द भी बाहर से घूम के आया है, हमारे अपने लिए शब्द ये है कि हम लोग सनातनी हैं, लेकिन अब हजारों साल से इस शब्द का इस्तेमाल किया जा रहा है, हम भी इस्तेमाल करते हैं, तो कौन सी इसमें खराबी है? अगर आप कह रहे हैं कि हम लोग बाहर के इन्फ्लुएंसेस को अपनाएं, तो हम अपने लिए जो शब्द है उसको भी अपनाएंगे।
Good evening, sir. I'm Dhairya. Good evening, sir. My name is Dhairya. I'm a student of law. Sir, in all this context, where is Sri Lanka here? I mean, do we first find its mention Ramayana only, or it has some link to the Indian mainland also?
No, it has many links to the Indian mainland.
Sir, in your discourse, you did not mention it once also. So, how it is related? I would like to know.
Well, obviously, Sri Lanka has many links to us. Civilizationally, they have, and for that matter, Nepal has also been a part of our civilization. The majority population of Sri Lanka are the Sinhalese, who have their origins in Bengal and Odisha. Sinhalese as a language is derived from old Bengali. So, there is obviously, they are a part of our wider civilization. They are, however, not a part of our republic. And that's why I said, even in the constitution, that distinction is there. Nepal is also a part of our civilization, but is not part of our political identity as a Republic of India. So they are two somewhat different things. But that is why when the constitution was made, they write India, which represents the Republic. That is Bharat, which is meaning that we recognize that we are the modern manifestation of this ancient civilization. Is a union of states. So अभी administratively हम लोग इसको union of states की तरह चलाएंगे. यही. So they are a part of our civilizational identity, but they are not a part of our political identity. That is also true of, for example, people in Bali. They are part of our civilizational identity, but they are not a part of our political identity.
सर जैसा सर अभी तक के जो टॉक में दो चीजें अगर देखा जाए तो सामने आई हैं, एक हमारे देश के बाहर और हमारे देश में ही एक ऐसा तबका है जो कि हमारे अंदर ऐसा दिखाना चाहता है कि आप एक हारी हुई सिविलाइजेशन है या आप कोई बहुत पुरानी सिविलाइजेशन नहीं है। तो इनके लिए एक चीज ये हो सकती है कि अभी के टाइम में हिस्ट्री में जैसा हमने देखा कि काफी रिसर्च का एक वाइड स्कोप खुला हुआ है, तो इसमें रिसर्चेस क्यों उतनी नहीं हो पा रही हैं। दूसरी ये चीज कि मैं अगर आज यहाँ से जाता हूँ, मैं क्योंकि जूलॉजी का स्टूडेंट हूँ, मेरा हिस्ट्री से या पॉलिटिकल साइंस से उतना रिलेशन नहीं है, फिर भी मेरा आइडेंटिटी के प्रति अपने लिए की एक भावना है, उसके लिए मैं आया। लेकिन जो मेरे बाकी के सहपाठी मित्र हैं, अगली बार ऐसा कुछ होता है तो मैं उनका कंट्रीब्यूशन उसमें कैसे दूं या उन्हें कैसे इसके बारे में जागरूक कर सकूं, अगर इसके बारे में आप कुछ बता सकें।
तो देखिए, इतिहास को फिर से लिखने की जरूरत है, ये तो इसमें कोई संदेह नहीं है। मैं स्वयं इकोनॉमिस्ट हूँ, मैं कोई इतिहासकार नहीं हूँ। मैंने अपने ऊपर ये एक भार लिया है कि मैं अपने तरीके से इस इतिहास को रिसर्च कर रहा हूँ, लेकिन काफी हद तक ये जो इंडियन हिस्ट्री का जो ये रीराइटिंग है वो सिर्फ हिस्टोरियंस नहीं कर सकते, इसमें बहुत क्रॉस कटिंग इंटरडिसिप्लिनरी रिसर्च की जरूरत है। इकोनॉमिक हिस्ट्री फॉर एग्जांपल, शुड इट बी रिटन बाय द इकोनॉमिस्ट्स और बाय द हिस्टोरियंस? सिमिलरली, should we think history of art should be done by the artists or should be done by the historians? The point is, we have left it to historians. That there is no need for it to do. It requires collaboration. Secondly, do remember that this particular history that we have inherited was largely written in colonial period because the colonial project wanted to dominate us, and the best way to dominate somebody is to begin to tell their story back to them in a different way. So they did it very systematically. I mean, to be fair to the British, they really invested in our understanding and rewriting our history. But it's very interesting how they went about doing it. So have you noticed that when we read our history books, even today, that no matter when the battle happens, Indians always lose. Battle of Plassey, Indians lose. 3 battles of Panipat, whoever happens to be on the Indian side loses. Battle of Buxar, you lose. Whatever it is. So now, since we are still around, we surely should have won some battles. We are still here now. So what happened to those battles? The reason they were all edited out is because the British wanted us to feel the sense of inferiority, and so they systematically edited it out. So, for example, even today, we read Samudragupta, one of our greatest generals, by the way. We created an empire, he went all the way down to southern India, etc., etc. Samudragupta is known as the Napoleon of India. It's a colonial term. Now Indians get very excited. Napoleon of India बोल दिया, बहुत सम्मान दिया. But what the colonial historians are doing is essentially saying, yes, he was a great general, but remember, we beat Napoleon. That is the messaging. And we have, still our textbooks use this term. Similarly, notice the way the textbook is written, you will get the impression the Mughals came, they ruled India, and then the British took over India. What they don't tell you is in the intervening 80 years, the Marathas ruled India. Right? Now 80 years is not a short period of time. The Indian Republic has still not existed for 80 years. So what happened to that 80-year period? The British were very, very afraid that there would be another revolt, particularly led by all these kingdoms that had still been left over by the Marathas. And so they quietly dropped out the Maratha period from our history books. So what happens is, Mughals rule India, British rule India. Intervening period, vanish. You will almost certainly not know anything about Bajirao except for that movie about Mastani. Yes, the gentleman there.